we're ready for winter break. Okay, so I think we have plenty of people, right, Gil? We can get started?
We can.
Okay, awesome. So I'd like to call our Culture, Climate and Behavior Committee. I just want to change the name to Culture, Climate and Behavior Committee meeting to order at 6:34 p.m. and ask Gail to call the roll, please.
Dr. Ammons?
Present.
Ms. Bishop?
Present.
Mr. Davis?
Present.
Dr. Starks Turner?
Present.
Ms. Kraft?
Here.
Ms. Francoise Blue? Okay, Ms. Gabadon? Mr. Johnson? Ms. Jones-McLeod?
Here.
Ms. Grimes?
Here.
Ms. Perellis? Ms. Hardwick? Ms. Harris?
Here.
Ms. Queen?
Here.
Dr. Moore? I don't know if she's arrived yet. Ms. Stigger? Ms. Stigger,
Stigger, you had it right.
okay, all right, thank you. Dr. Pruitt-Adams?
Present.
Mr. Martin?
Here.
Dr. Sanders?
Here.
Ms. Dixon-Spivey?
Here.
Ms. Steffens?
Here.
Mr. Beckton-Goss?
Here.
Ms. Chase Thompson?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Present.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Do we have any visitor comments?
We do.
Okay, great.
Just a moment.
And Gail, I see that Ms. Francoise Blue is here.
Oh, thank you. So this is addressed to the Culture, Climate, and Behavior Committee. I'm sure you've all heard of the recent opt-ed by Board of Education member Matt Barron in the Wednesday Journal. When you see something, say something. As an individual on the Board of Education, Mr. Barron has or does not have direct decision-making when it comes to student discipline, but he certainly can have an impact on policy and culture and climate. Mr. Barron's comments have been interpreted as Islamic. They would directly relate to post-911 language during a time when that was rampant in the US. I believe the board members should model behavior they would like to see from students, faculty, and staff, and that clearly in this instance, Mr. Barron has failed to act appropriately. What role, does this committee have in recommending action to the Board of Education when a board member is actively creating a climate of racial hostility in the community? Or if Mr. Barron fails to see how his words and actions were incendiary and offensive, ensuring that he has the training and knowledge to be an effective board member of an institution working to create a welcoming environment where all students experience a sense of belonging. Thank you for your time. And that is from Rebecca Malinowski. That's all I have.
Thank you. I see Ms. Stigger is here now as well.
Thank you.
And thank you for the public comment. It's not intended to be a dialogue, just so that people know. And what's next, Gail? Approval. Oh, I would move approval of the minutes.
Right.
November 4th, Culture, Climate, and Behavior Committee. Do we have a second?
Your voice faded off. We couldn't hear you.
Oh, because there's some kind of issue with my, is that better? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So I would move approval of the minutes. Do we have a second? The minutes from November 4th.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Pruitt-Adams.
And so all ayes or nays?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
I don't hear
Thank
any.
you.
Okay, and next we're going to move into circle. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit distracted, you all. So we are going to, oh, I see Dr. Moore just arrived as well.
Thank you.
So we're going to move into circle tonight. We have some really good conversations to have tonight about restorative practices, but I want us to have a conversation first together about, you know, our purview of this committee is really to provide recommendations to the board, to have conversations about, you know, the strategic goals and plans. And also we merged with the accountability committee so that there's, you know, some accountability pieces for our committee as well, right? So we have been looking at quite a few different things this school year and since the beginning of this year, in light of being in the middle of crisis distance learning and all of the things. But what we know is that racism and all of those things, that white supremacy culture, ideology, all of these things are still impacting the institution that we're all serving. We're all either, we have students here, we have, you know, board members here, we have community members here. These things are still present. And so I think for our, I've thought about this a lot today. For our circle tonight, one of the things that we're going to be looking at tonight, and we're going to get a report on, is the restorative practices work that's actually being done. It is not, I want to just say, restorative practices is not a bullet for it's going to get everything done. It's not the one piece that's going to transform the culture in our school to be what we would really hope that it would be, which would be equitable, and that any outcomes are not based on race or any other defining characteristic, right? That's what we would like to see. So before we move into that conversation, I just want to, our circle tonight, I would love for each person to answer the question, what do you feel is required for us to eradicate racism in this institution? Now, that's a big question. So, and we have a lot of people in our committee. So we do not have time for everyone to give a 2-minute answer to that question. But I want you to think, to drill down, right? Our committee has a purview. We have a way that we can provide information, feedback. You're specifically here as community members and as students and as all the people that are here to provide feedback. So if you're thinking about the feedback that we can provide, how do we begin to eradicate racism in our school? Like, just from your perspective where you are, remember, I'm going to cut you off as the circle keeper that I am if you get too long, because there's too many of us, and we want to hear from everyone. Because yes, restorative is a piece of that, but I just would love to hear some input from our folks here tonight. And I know I'm going right in on it, but that's because I've been going right in on it for a while now. I think you all are used to me, so we're just going to answer that question. So I'm going to start in the top right to my right, and the first person to my top right is Susan. Susan, you're going to be first. So remember, we're keeping it succinct. Like, if you get longer than 30 seconds or so, I don't have a thing to ding you. I will just be like, we're going to keep it so everyone gets an opportunity to speak. I will interrupt you. Remember that. Okay, thank you. You're still muted, Susan.
Okay, there we go. All right, so this is too big of a question. I don't know where to start. It is such a big question, and it's the great question. It's the best question. So with 30 seconds, I don't know what to say. It goes so deep and there's so many layers to it. I would say that every layer needs to be addressed from the ground to the top.
Thanks, Susan. The next is Linda Parker.
Authenticity and intentionality. Say what you mean and do the work.
Way to keep it succinct, Linda. Lincoln.
Education. So just awareness of shared experience, and then also just interrogation of current policies. Either we are perpetuating the status quo or we're changing it.
Thanks, Lincoln. Sherilyn.
I'd first say openness, open to change, open to listening, open to hearing other points of view. And then being able to call out what we see and fearless enough to tackle it, and not let any bias or any constituency that you belong to make you fearful for calling out what's right.
Thank you. Karen.
I agree with Susan. It's so deep that it's hard to even know what's exactly going to address it. From what people say, I mean, the student to student things that are so egregious that shouldn't be said. I don't know if relationship building within classrooms to hear from each other, how that affected them, if that's going to build more empathy, but certainly more empathy building among the student body is necessary.
Thank you. Quincy.
I would say education and just like being open to learning, like, Miss Grimes said previously, like, just learning more about like student to student, learning more about your classmates, where they come from. But yeah, other than that, I really have no idea.
Thank you. That was excellent. Roxana?
Building awareness, promoting education, and making systemic changes.
Thank you. Chase?
Teaching our students tolerance and practicing diversity in their classrooms.
I'm sorry, Chase, you were breaking up a little bit, so I totally did not get that. And I want to hear that very badly, so please.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
It's a little in and out, but just go ahead.
All right. I would say teaching tolerance and practicing diversity in the classrooms.
She said teaching tolerance and practicing diversity in the classroom.
Thank you, Dr. Pruitt-Adams. You're next.
I was going to hope that you'd let me go last because I'd like to just hear.
Okay, that's fine. I could do that. I can honor that tonight. LeVar.
Yes, I will. I'll echo what everybody else is saying, right? Huge question, great question. But like Lincoln, it's the interrogation of policy is first, because that's going to determine how we show up, right? And how we practice on a daily basis. But also when we talk about eradicating racism, there is a moral imperative to this, right? To be able to see people's humanity. So until we can get to that place of truly just, being genuine and caring about one another and seeing each other as human, that's what it's going to take for us to eradicate racism.
Thank you, LeVar. Janelle.
Take time to do more listening than talking, and seeking out the voices that are often not loud, who don't feel heard or even safe speaking.
Thank you. Sarah.
So I'm going to cheat a little bit and just say ditto what everyone else said. And, this, of course, is the question. And I think if it had one answer or a simple answer, we would have answered it by now in our work in this district. But I would say from my perspective, vulnerability and an ability to really be introspective and self-critical, I suppose, to kind of understand ourselves better so that we can better understand the people that we're with.
Thanks, Sarah. Francis.
I would say intentional relationship building and sort of the idea of a movement where people decide on action steps and stick together and push back against when the attacks come and push for what has to change.
Thank you. Gail, you want to toss an answer in there? You're in the room.
I'm good.
Okay. Cal?
Let's see. Teach respect as a way of life and kind of enforce consequence of bad actions.
David Watson.
I say peeling back the layers and not being afraid to call people out. Sometimes people don't realize what they're saying or doing, and they honestly don't realize the position they're in or the hurt that they're causing, and educating people.
Thanks, David. Jackie Moore.
Jackie Moore. In terms of our school, our district, our community, I think the first thing, and it saddens me to have to say this, but is our community admitting that racism exists in our district, in our community, and that systemic racism is not calling out individuals, and words like white supremacy culture, white supremacist privilege, are things that we have to be able to talk about to change our system. And finally, I think we have to have our majority culture, our white folks in our community ready, willing to do the work of educating themselves and embracing the change that is said to be desired.
Thank you. Melanie.
Dr. Jackie already took the words out of my mouth, and so did LeVar, but I will repeat it. We have to believe that racism exists. We still have a large majority that believe we should just stop whining and pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and make it through like everyone else, and absolving themselves from the situations that they are perpetuating the racism in. So, and care. You have to actually care about the situation in order to make it better. And unfortunately, we're lacking the care too.
Thanks, Melanie. Talib.
I would just say, to keep it simple, accountability and re-education. Yeah.
Thanks, Talib. Greg.
Thanks, Gina. And sorry, everybody, I was otherwise occupied, so I'm logging in just a tad late. My apologies. But I was able to catch all of these conversations. And so I do want to say that one thing that I want to stress that I've heard that I think is of critical importance is courage. We've talked a lot about reflection and listening to voices and challenging the system and challenging a community. And I think you can't do this work, whether you're looking inwards or whether you're looking outwards, without the courage to sit in what can be incredibly challenging and uncomfortable. And so one characteristic it consistently needs is courage at every step of the process.
Thanks, Greg. Shalima.
Thanks.
I would say it's a few things from my perspective. One is you've been educated, you've been encouraged, so what now? You have the knowledge, you have the skill, what will you do with it? Stop apologizing, stop feeling bad, take action. Less talk, more doing.
Thank you, Shalima. Felicia.
I would echo what a lot of people have already said. I was thinking about having courageous conversations, and as a result of that, making bold moves. But at the root of it all, I think, is building relationships as a foundation to be able to have those conversations and to make those bold moves.
Thank you. Hugo. Well, you're in the space, you can.
I would have to say education and just being aware of the issue. That's really it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And Nichelle.
I swear I know how to work Zoom. This is not a quick way to answer this, but I will be quick. We won't eradicate racism. It just won't happen, and we have to accept that, I think. And there's far more radical reasons for me to say that, but I've been reading this book called Radical Dharma, and it really is understanding who we are in our own selves before we can speak, learn, read, talk, and be courageous if we really truly aren't understanding where we're coming from and where we're working from. But also in terms of the reality of where we are now in teaching, building those relationships is the most important thing, period.
Thank you. Dr. Pruitt-Adams.
So I heard a lot of good things. I'm going to, the policy piece is great, but I agree with Ms. McQueen and Dr. Moore, and about what has to happen externally. We don't teach racism in our high school. We don't teach that. And so how do you, for us to, it comes from outside within, and we can try to contain it as much as we possibly can inside. But until we change outside, until we change what is bringing it into our building, we're going to continue to fight. So for those of us who fight, we have to stay focused. We have to stay encouraged, because as Nichelle said, we are not going to eradicate it. If we knew how, it would have been done a long time ago. But we have to stay focused. We have to stay encouraged. We do have to be strong, but we also have to acknowledge the fact that it is draining. It is extremely draining, and it has to be something that is deep within you in order to continue to fight it. So we are the messengers, and we can continue to deliver the message. But what comes into our building comes into our building. We don't teach it here.
Thank you, everyone. The answer is in the room. I just want to point out that any one of those answers is not enough, but the answer is in the room. The collective has the answer. And if we took everything that everyone said and we actually did all of those things, I'm just floored. And the idea that we could eradicate it, how do we do that with a system that we're functioning in a system that it was founded on? So I just thought I would get us right to the heart of things before we start having the rest of this conversation tonight, because we each have some piece to play in what happens next. And especially this committee, we have a piece to play in what happens next. And I'm excited because our board is actually going to be looking at an equity audit proposal Thursday night at our committee of the whole. And I'm really interested in what does that mean and what outcomes does it produce? Because everything you all just said is what needs to happen. So I'm just so grateful for your yes to this committee, for your yes to having that conversation, and for being willing to go dig right on in. I'm going to turn it over to, hold on, I can't remember who I'm turning it over to. I believe I'm turning it over to Greg. I was going to say Greg, see? Thank you, Dr. Pruitt-Adams. I believe I'm turning it over to Greg to get us started in this conversation about the restorative practices that are currently happening in the building, and us and our understanding of what that looks like. Right, Greg?
First I'm hearing it. I have no idea. So no, I'm kidding, of course. Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, in due course, I'm just turning it right over to Linda and Janelle here in a little bit here. But what we want to do is talk a little bit about the current status of our behavior education plan, like what that means in our current remote environment. And furthermore, digging further into that, what restorative work looks like and what we are doing right now in the remote world, and how we are planning for not only the transition into the spring semester, but transitioning, of course, into our work beyond even the school year. So, so with that said, I think Linda is going to jump in first and begin that overview. Is that right, Linda?
Yes. And thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good to be with all of you all. I just want to reflect for a moment in what Gina was saying as she ran that circle about how restorative work is not just a single bullet. It's not the one thing that's going to solve everything. And yet I agree with her that the answer exists within this group, within our building, understanding that it's a collaborative effort and it's going to push our comfort zones, because so often we look outside of ourselves for who's going to fix it. So whose job is it to fix it? And it's each one of our responsibility to make sure that we are playing a role in that, whether it be wanting and needing to participate in a restorative conversation, even when you don't want to, because you think it may hurt too much, and also understanding what it means to be involved in a process like that and having patience with the process. So we began this year with a brand new code of conduct that had been changed to a behavior education plan that was spent lots of hours and rolled out last year in terms of just preparation for this year, not knowing that we were going to be in a pandemic and talking to one another through a screen. So where it is active and live in our documentation, the actual rollout, we were actually lost the opportunity to roll it out to our students in an in-person fashion as we wanted to gain more understanding of what it was, and then also the opportunity to formally roll it out to staff so that they understood their new role in our BEP, which was a little different than how it is in the code of conduct. In our remote world, our infractions are different and they're limited. By that I mean, we've had Zoom bombings that have occurred. We've had some disruptive behavior, but it's been on a very minimal scale because we're on this platform. And as opposed to being a student who was in a classroom and you're there and reacting to the environment, there are times when you don't even have to be on the screen if you're having a moment and then you're absent. And so the teachers aren't dealing with the same level of infraction as they would on a normal basis. There are no hallways to monitor and making sure that the behavior within those hallways are corrected. So what we've done in those cases where we've had the disruptive behavior or the Zoom bombing, we have still run our in-school reflection center. So students there is no out-of-school suspension, there's no real in-school suspension because we're all home. Those students though have been made to participate in after-school reflection. So they are assigned time to meet with Ms. Lush and Mr. Harris to reflect on the activity that happened and to kind of unpack why they're in this space and why they're participating in this moment. And they do that each of the days. It would range between 1 to 3 days that students would have to participate in this. As well as that, deans have been involved with speaking with teachers and continuing conversations with them on how to restore in situations when the Zoom bombing has occurred or the disruptive behavior, as well as pointing out to them if the disruptive behavior was one that would be a level 1 in our new BEP, how the teacher would be responsible for handling that if we were in the classroom setting at this time, because that is what's called for. So where there's still some intervention by the dean, there is a reminder that the BEP in place would have teachers handling this more directly in their environment.
Did you already explain what BEP stands for? I don't know, like, if everyone is familiar with what that term is.
Yes, at the very start, I said it's the behavior education plan. And it is a more in-depth restorative work than just a look at the consequences to a infraction. So it's more so different stages. So now instead of having just 3 levels, there are 5. And expulsion is a very last level 5, and it's very, very difficult to get to a level 5 type of infraction. So there are different interventions and steps before that in the effort to kind of remediate and to work with students to reteach new behaviors so that they can replace the behavior that got them in the space and place that they were in with the initial behavior. I like to use what Janelle says often: all the students have the opportunity to mess up once. You know, you get an opportunity to need a moment of correction without having some type of very punitive measure taken. But again, the idea with the restoration is to acknowledge the harm that was caused and then work to repair that harm with the parties involved, whether that be student to student or student to teacher in those activities.
Linda, can I add? We've also had some cyberbullying that has occurred. We have also had, and really the pandemic and being full remote has really forced more restorative conversations than I think people thought they would be having, because there is, little to be done in terms of what others would feel would be different kinds of consequences. And so we've spent a great deal of time having many restorative conversations, and even, between students having, virtual mediations over Zoom or Google Meet. And also when there has been some harm in the classroom, having those conversations with the teachers. And, as someone who has participated in them, I felt really good about the conversations that have happened, and did not feel the impact of it being virtual as much as I thought I would in terms of the level of effectiveness.
Thank you, Janelle. I will also add too, so what have our deans been doing then if there's no discipline infractions at the quantity or experience that we do at school? One of the things Janelle and I worked on at the start of this year, since we knew we were going to be in remote, is a refocus on just that idea that I mentioned in terms of students not being in the space if they're not feeling the space. Like if we're in school and the kids can't go anywhere, that's sometimes when some of those triggers, things will boil to the surface and have an infraction occur. But if I don't come to the class because I just don't, participate in the remote learning for that day, I'm absent. But we also know that means they're absent from their learning, which is the whole reason why we want to be restorative and to look at alternate methods to making sure that students aren't missing instructional time. So the focus the deans started and are still continuing in is for those students who have multiple absences and frequent absences. They have been calling, speaking to the students, texting the students on their school phones, in some cases waking students up so that they get to class, speaking to parents, doing home visits to try to activate the students who tend to be our students of color, and getting them back into the swing of things at the remote level. We have a lot of students who are struggling with the remote environment just because it is so different than the in-person environment. And when we talked about eradicating racism, we talked a lot about relationship. And so much of those relationships are built in person. Like some of the connections we have to people on this screen is because when we're in the building, we've built a relationship with them. And so when I see you on the screen, or when I run a meeting today where I get different people from the building together, they're so excited to see each other because they remember when they used to be together. That is something our kids miss. And in the conversation of like, what's the point of being together if we're together with masks? I always bring that up. Like sometimes it's nice to get out the house and go to the grocery store just because there's other people. And whether you can touch them or not, it's nice to be around other people. So our deans have been working vigilantly to get our students back onto the platform and into the classrooms and not missing their instructional time as much as before. So that is one way that it's showing up. Go ahead, Janelle. Sorry.
And just to add to that, what, you know, a lot of times those conversations certainly feel punitive when we're asking kids, why do you have unexcused absences when we're in the building? They feel punitive even if we don't intend them to feel that way, because there are, you know, this number of absences and you're gonna not get credit for the class. There are things that can happen if you having too many absences from class, and that is not the case now. And so when we are having these conversations with students, just to say, what can I do to help? There is nothing, bad that's going to happen other than the obvious, right? Like you might get a bad grade in this class or not get credit, but the conversations are centered around, what can I do to help you? And I know it's hard. And the removal of anything punitive feeling from the conversation has been really helpful. And I think it has been impactful for kids as well as parents who are mightily struggling, who we find ourselves counseling as well when we are having these conversations. So I just want to add that, the thrust into this environment has lent itself to some much more restorative conversations than any of us would have expected.
Thank you, Janelle. And then I just want to talk about my planning for the restorative work as we go forward. What I think I've noticed in this environment and what I reflect on when we're together in the school building is that to me, it feels better to have a deeper understanding of one concept when it comes to restorative practice that you can then build on than to try to make everyone experts in all of it in the hopes that they will use something of it. And so what I'm looking forward to doing as a plan to making this just an essential part of our work at the building is focusing on one specific aspect of restorative practices, which I have just been throwing around so far as the community building circles, and really intensively working with our teachers, working with our staff, working with our students through our teachers with this so that they feel very well learned on the concept and how to implement and coached on that so that we can start seeing it in several places within our building. And then once we feel more comfort with that, moving on to another. And I think this is going to be more effective than just trying to show somebody everything and hoping that it gets out there. So that's my plan going forward so that direction, idea of how I would like to see that grow in our building so that more people are seeing it, using it, and feeling as though they have a better understanding of what it truly is.
Thanks, Linda and Janelle. Part of the reason why we asked, thank you. I don't know if you heard me say thank you. My computer, if I'm not close enough, it can't read me. Part of the reason why we asked, to begin to have this discussion was because of some of the comments that the students brought to us in the committee around, feeling like they had participated in a restorative process, but it did not feel restorative, right? So what I'm hearing a lot of in your conversation is a lot about what's done to the child who has done something that has been, an infraction. I'm not necessarily hearing the other side of it, but I want to open it up to questions from the committee really quickly because I know it's already 7:15 and I'm so always mindful of time. But I do want some input from the committee around what you all heard from what was presented. So feel free to unmute yourself.
I'll go. Does anybody else want to go?
I was just going to say, it sounds like what you guys are doing is hard work, but it also sounds like a huge opportunity that I think that you have, Linda, you were saying that, or maybe it was Janelle, that was one of you were saying, obviously, sorry, but that you were, you had begun to the first telling the kids that it was punitive if, you know, they were missing a certain amount of assignments, but this, now that it's remote, it seems like the conversation is a little bit away from those punitive actions, and you can build a stronger relationship. And I guess what I'm trying to say is we're onto something there, and you guys, the work that you're putting into that, I think that you're going in the right direction, and lean into that. And if we could get more people to support you guys in the community to do that, how do we do that? But I think that you guys are doing an amazing job.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Melanie.
I don't really know what way to start, but to just tell it like it is. As a parent and as an advocate for other families at Oak Park River Forest High School with Apple, we did recently have a situation, and I was thoroughly disappointed. I was extremely, the positives, Dr. Dixon showed up and facilitated a very healthy conversation. The negative, we had to wait 2 weeks for it. We got no response for 2 weeks. The teacher herself told us that she was instructed not to respond back to the parent because of the situation. And that to me really felt like, here we go again with, we're going to protect the school and we're not going to care about the student. Now we have, when we talk about why students are not showing up and why they're not engaged, we're still talking about student to student interaction, and we're skipping over the relationship building with the adult in the room, and that's the teacher. My daughter has no relationship with any of her teachers, but she has a relationship with me, and she knows what my standards are in this house in regards to education. Not every child has that. But when you have a teacher that has not taken the time to build a relationship with a student, although this is virtual, it's new for everyone, that makes it doubly difficult because it is new for everyone. And I really think it remiss for me not to say, watching how uncomfortable this Caucasian teacher was in trying to understand her role in making a student feel the way that they were made to feel. The best way I can describe this is that, you know, imagine someone accuses you of theft. You're thinking about your character, you're thinking about, you know, who you are and people that know you and how this is something you would never do. How could someone accuse you of being a thief when you actually did take something, but you don't think it's the same kind of theft that they think it is? It was really eye-opening to watch. So when I say, I echo what Dr. Moore said earlier in regards to people believing in racism, believing in how their actions are affecting other people, whether they intend for it to happen or not. We still have teachers in our building that do not understand the repercussions of how they are projecting racism onto children, whether they realize it or not. And we're not equipping them to feel comfortable enough to have the conversation to be better. We're equipping them to tolerate. Those are two very different things. I don't want to be tolerated. I want to be treated like a person, like you would treat another person. And so I feel like that's a huge component that's missing. I don't feel like the teacher in that situation feels that next time they're going to do things differently. They feel like, oh, I got called out this time. You caught me, on to the next. So I feel it important that we, and this was another thing too, it's important to bring that up, but I also feel that it's important to understand that because this is new for everyone, we don't know when everything is going to be back to normal. As we have students that need more help not tutor help, help from their instructor, their primary instructor, for them to explain to them what is going on in the class. What are we doing to support teachers to make sure that they are compensated for this extra time, compensated for being able to help any of these students that are, falling through the cracks yet again? Tutors are great, but they weren't in the class when the assignment was assigned. The child and the teacher were. So I feel like, in addition to them now doing e-learning, we're going to get burnout, or we probably already have. This has already been almost a year now. Burnout is going to come really quickly. What are we doing to ensure that these teachers are being supported? What are we doing to ensure that when there is a issue between a relationship with a student and a teacher, that the teacher is being supported and guided on how to end that conversation? The uncomfortability, you could feel it. And I felt equally bad for the teacher as I did for the family, but I still feel like something is missing, because it's not fair for the teacher to feel like this is how this conversation is supposed to be had. These are my next steps, and this is what I'm supposed to do so that this never happens again.
I feel compelled to, and you said a lot of things that are really things that we need to hear, but the restorative piece tied to also professional development for teachers and what needs to happen for kids, that's part of what Ms. Parker and Ms. Bishop are addressing. The other piece that you mentioned about the burnout and all of that, that's some of what we're trying to also address in the hybrid plan. I just want to make sure people know those are two separate compartments, although they ultimately impact each other. So I get that. But the piece that Ms. Parker and Ms. Bishop are covering today is more of this new transition, because this is the first year of implementing the behavior education plan. And as you said, Melanie, and trying to do it in a virtual world is a challenge. So we do know we've got a lot cut out. I just wanted to say that the other pieces, we hear you, but that was not a part of their behavior education plan. That falls on us with the hybrid plan and the other things we're doing instructional.
Adams, I think too, one of the things I just want to echo that Melanie said, and that what we know is effective, is like, we're still talking about trying to fix the kids. Like, that's what it sounds like to me, but I want us to be talking about the adult behaviors. The adult behaviors in the building are the driving factors. So it's like that piece of what she was saying. Definitely that's two separate parts, Dr. Pruitt-Adams, I hear you. But the adult, that's a big piece.
And I wasn't negating that piece. The piece I was saying was separate. What she was also talking about, the resources we need to provide to ward off the students' fatigue, those other things that we just as an instructional team and administrative team need to focus on as well.
And do hear me say, I don't disagree with anything that Melanie said at all. Right. Because to me, it is a snapshot of all industries. Like I can speak to experiences I've had of the same manner, just in the world as well. I want to just emphasize, though, when I spoke about the plan forward in terms of the community building circles and picking one aspect, it really was for the teachers, because I need the teachers to be able to send information out and work that within their classroom. So the community building is to show them how to better build that in the classroom so that these relationships we're talking about are absent can be more prevalent and present. I will say, in a school this big, I don't expect every adult to connect and have a deep relationship with every student, but I believe that every student should have a relationship with some adult in the building. And that is what we aim to make happen. So in no way am I saying we learn this so that we can teach the kids how to build community. The adults in the building must learn how to build community, even in our brokenness of racism, because as I agree too, we're not eradicating it. We got to get to the point where we can even be comfortable just speaking in a room about it, but at least learning that together, we don't move anywhere if we don't move together. And we can't do it in a silo. We must do it as a team. And we've got to get more people on the team and willing to do the work. Like I said earlier, do the work to build it and believe that it's everyone's job to do that. Like, as long as I think it's the counselor's job to build the social emotional, we get nowhere. We all have to do it.
And I would add to that, in our beginning conversations with teachers about the behavior expectation plan, it focused around a change of mindset. And you've heard Linda say that in multiple presentations that she's given about that change in mindset. For example, how we receive a child that comes into our classroom that might have a bad attitude or might use profanity or might act out in some kind of way. How we as the adults receive a kid in the hallway who blows us off if we ask, do you have a pass? How we are reacting and responding and changing our practices so that we aren't taking these things personally, so that we are becoming more trauma informed, to help the mindset shift. So I would say that this behavior expectation plan and a few other things that we are working on, just the culture of warmth, the trauma informed position that is coming, all of those things do indeed focus on adult thinking and changing mindsets so that we can have different interactions with our kids, no matter how they show up on any given day.
Now, I want to open it up to the any students or other community members that would like to share or have comments or questions. Students first, if the students have something. No? It's okay if you don't. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just trying to make sure that your voice gets recognized in the space. So don't feel like you have to say something, but I do want you to know that your voice has significance here. So that's all. But don't feel obligated, like no pressure. But I'm sure that there's some other people who have comments, so.
If that includes staff,
Yes,
I would just want to kind of piggyback on something that was mentioned, and that was just in terms of a connection, and Linda used this, the connection that an adult has with a student. And I'm wondering if there is an opportunity, there's always an opportunity to recalibrate how we as a school community all take ownership of every baby that walks through the door. And that's a kind of a philosophy that I know coming from districts that are pre-K through 12, having the mindset as a district that no matter what school, how or what size with that community, if that district or that school has a mindset of taking ownership for every child, whether they're ESL, Latinx, gender fluid, Black, white, Asian, we all took ownership of ensuring safety, the best education and support for every student that walks through the door. And that was from instructional to administrative to custodial. And there's always an opportunity to recalibrate so that the responsibility doesn't rest on one person in one role per their title. So I just want to underscore that what Linda said with that.
Yeah, I don't think there's an expectation of one person doing all of the work. That's not,
that
wouldn't be restorative if we have an expectation that just the administrators get it, right? Like that's not right. So like it is truly a community thing. So thank you for that, Shalima. I appreciate it. I want to open it up to any other comments from folks who aren't having this conversation every day as part of their job, because like we don't get to hear from some of our community members that frequently. So I would love to put your voices in the space as well. And if no one has anything, oh, Sherilyn, go ahead.
So many things said that I agreed with, and one of the things that stood out is that when you're doing trauma-informed work and you're trying to build community, there's lots of ways to do it, lots of techniques, but it's not focused on the curriculum, it's more on the mindset. And so I think in our school, we need to figure out ways to help teachers change their mindsets around how they receive children and how they react. And if nothing else, being willing to accept the responsibility that I may have been wrong in this situation and I should be the one to apologize or push to restore the relationship. You know, when we have circle with students, we want there to be a resolve. And sometimes when the issue is teacher to student, the teacher is the one who caused the harm and should be seeking to resolve. But I know from many schools that I've worked in, that's sometimes a hard mindset shift for teachers to think that I was the harm in this situation. Like, no, that kid did such and such, but you provided a trigger or you provided an atmosphere that was not conducive to that child. And being trauma informed, you have to be mindful that there could be a trigger. You don't know what the trigger is. And so you may not have intentionally set the student off or triggered something in them, but once you have the knowledge that you did, you have to be willing to accept the responsibility and apologize. And I think that if we can get teachers to a point that the mindset has shifted enough that they can see their part in the situation, even if the student did something, like they escalated and they had to be removed from, they have to be able to see where they triggered that situation or where they may have misstepped. It's not about pointing fingers, it's humanity. We're all walking this walk, we're all trying. So every day you're not going to be great. Every day you're going to make a mistake. Being able to accept the responsibility that, you know what, this kid, he did curse me out. He did do that, but I did push him. I know math is not his strong suit and I kept pushing him and he felt embarrassed and then he blew up. Or, you know, I did disregard him in the class, you know, whatever it is that you have to be able to reflect and see what was my role in the situation as it unfolded. And when you're having the restorative conversation with the student, being willing, you may have to be the one to first say, I apologize. I'm going to take responsibility because although you had a part in this, I also had a part in it. That will open up the student to say, well, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't have done blah, blah, blah. But if they can see that an adult or a teacher is willing to be vulnerable and say, I messed up, that encourages students, in my experience, to open up as well. And then you can have a conversation, a restorative conversation. But if the teacher is just going to sit and be the right person in the conversation, then not much will happen. So.
And there's no loss in power. I think that's a big issue and concern, power and respect. This is my classroom. These are my rules. And when you step out of line, there's nothing of the person in leadership making any kinds of apologies about anything, whether it's how it made you feel. And one of the biggest ones of even wanting to come into my classroom. If any of you have ever been embarrassed by your parents, if you've ever been embarrassed by your boss, it's not that easy to go back into that office again because you feel some kind of way. I don't care how old you are. And when you're talking about a child, you call them teenagers, they're children. When we're talking about them and they're already going through puberty, some starting, some in the middle of it, those emotions, you will never know if that is going to stay with them for the rest of their lives. We have no idea what's going on at home because there's no care. No one's done the deep dive to find out really what's going on. Do teachers really have the time? Out of all the students that they have, do they really have the time to do a deep dive into every single student that they have? And so we have to be realistic about it. There has to be care. And there has to be support for that teacher who just doesn't know where to start with this conversation. I think it's completely unrealistic for any of us, if any of us do think this way, that the teachers are just equipped to do everything. They are super, they are amazing. But having those types of conversations, sometimes you need some assistance in learning where to start. And again, in the conversations that I had, the teacher needs support. It's not there.
I wanted to, I appreciate Sherilyn. Thank you so much. Your description of restorative work in prior districts and just the humanity that you're talking about. I think that's the piece that I know our students, our families, our teachers all desire the same thing. And just the way that you put it, I think is what frankly has been missing from how we're talking about restorative work. And I share Gina's concern with the student focus or student directed aspects of our restorative work. Even as we're talking about training teachers, it feels that it is about how to change behavior or how to manage behavior or compliance. And that's an oversimplification, but the fact that it's so tied to our behavior education plan, when what we're talking about in terms of relationship building and community building transcends that. It is deeper than behavior. And we don't have any, to my knowledge, any teachers on CCB. So it's hard to even know how they're experiencing, this work. But to Nichelle's point as well, the thing that was, to me, the aha moment, and perhaps it's serendipity given we're in a pandemic, but the fact that the approach that deans are taking of, what do you need? Whether we're virtual or in person, that's the question. What do you need? And people can tell you, students can tell you, adults can tell you. And the adults in our building having a sense of that mindset shift that it's about relationship building as opposed to adhering to the appropriate behaviors or eliciting the appropriate behaviors is a mind shift. And it is, it's not easy, but until we are able to, use some of the language and the approach that Sherilyn just eloquently laid out, I think we may be stuck. And being on the board for almost 8 years, this has been at least 5 years that we've been talking about restorative work. So it is, I hope that her expertise can become a part of this conversation in a meaningful way with our staff and teachers in particular.
I think I'd like to just add to that, as we have progressed in this work, we are not where we want to be, but we are not where we used to be. And as a person who is doing this work every day and have been for a long time, I feel good to say that some of those conversations are indeed happening. I can give you a specific instance of a kid who cursed at a teacher over Zoom, and the teacher wrote him up and said that he threatened, he actually cursed at a TA, and the discipline referral said that he threatened the TA. And so I immediately said, hi, could you give me the exact words so that I could understand what the threat was? And he didn't respond right away. Then I asked again, could you please tell me exactly what was said? And then the teacher came back and said, actually, I checked and it wasn't a threat. He just used a curse word. And I said, well, you sent that to his parent, to him and his parent. And damage has been done. That child has, because I had a conversation with a student who said, he's out to get me. I did not threaten anybody. And so I had a direct conversation with that teacher about the harm that he caused by the use of his words. And our plan is to have a restorative conversation where he owns that harm to that student, because he may have this kid in class again next year. And so I want to speak to the fact that I think many of us are feeling more empowered to call it out when it's happening. And again, we are making progress in the right direction. And I can say personally that I am involved in those things happening. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Janelle. Any other comments?
Hi, so I'm really fascinated by what Janelle just said. It never occurred to me that deans would play such a large role in sort of coaching with teachers. And I'm just curious if that's, if in your experience, that's a newer thing that's happening as we've progressed as a district in this work, or is that something that's just been going on quietly and I didn't realize it, which is entirely possible. And what we can do to kind of promote that, right? Because there are certainly teachers who jump at the chance to get coaching, and then there are teachers who don't, right? And so you are kind of getting at that population that maybe isn't as eager to participate in the professional development piece, which I think must be very hard for you in some ways, right? Like it's a difficult position for you to be in because it's not technically a role of yours, but I think it's so important. So I'm just really curious about how that kind of plays out, if you want to share any more about that.
So it has evolved over time. I was a dean back when deans were a part of the union and not administrators. And that was a really hard time to have that kind of direct conversation with someone who would look at you and say, "You're not my boss." And so it was hard to have those conversations then. And just on the basis of the relationships, I have worked here for over 20 years and I have very strong relationships, and that can help me, but that could also hold me back sometimes, not wanting to offend. And I find myself to be a pretty, direct and unafraid person, but I still consider people's feelings. And so over time, I have become more comfortable because it's not about me. And if I don't speak up for the student, nobody will. And so I have always described my job as a dean as one who straddles a fence, actually advocating for both sides. And when I mentor deans, this is what I've always said. When you're having a meeting with a student and a teacher, you're actually there to advocate for both. And let me give you some ideas on how to do that, because that's really hard. But we advertise to teachers that we are here to help provide that professional development when it comes to behavior and classroom management. And my experience has been is the newer teachers, some of them seem more comfortable seeking us out, or we may notice the kind of referrals being written and we reach out and offer support. And so personality style also comes into play when having those conversations and the level of comfort there. And so I think that it's a work in progress, but when we speak to new teachers every year, we offer up our services for that purpose. That you calling me is not a reflection on your ability. We are here to help because we have all struggled at some point or another with classroom management, and we can just help provide support. So that is definitely something that is it has been actively happening for quite some time. The difference is, we cannot depend on the deans alone to change the mindset of the building. And so as the mindset shift has been happening, I have an experience with a colleague who got angry at me when I called her out about addressing a girl who was sucking her thumb in front of the whole class. And she got very angry at me. And it taught me a lot of things when I had that conversation about how to have it differently next time. But that was a long time ago. The conversations that we are having now about being more trauma responsive and trauma informed and understanding children where they're coming from, acknowledging what we are bringing personally when we come in, those really are changing how the conversations fall on people. If I say to you, you ever consider why she might be sucking her thumb? That is not going to sound like a strange question from me because of all of the other conversations that we are having in our building and the work that we are trying to do. Whereas when I said that to her 10 years ago, she blew up. And so I feel good about we are making progress, and it changes the work that I do, and it helps the conversation. Today, I feel more comfortable saying to that teacher 2 weeks ago, you really caused some harm here, and we've got to figure out a way to repair that, and not be because I'm backed, I'm supported by all of these other things that we are talking about as a school. I hope that helps, Sarah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, and thank you for your work.
I'll just very quickly add in just for a quick second to this, that Janelle's leadership with teachers in that regard is also aided over the past year by the little shift we've made by her position as a lead dean in the school, right? So it's not just with teachers, but you see kind of modeling of that coaching laterally with the other deans that she works with, which is always something that was kind of informal, but it's something now that is, you know, a little bit more by design in the system. So I just want to illustrate that.
That's thank you, Greg, and thank you, Janelle. Like personally, I feel you. I just do. It sounds very similar to some of the work that I do. You said something that really I think is something for us to dig into, and as we're as a committee thinking about how this, you know, how as a committee, like, I love our position that we get to provide input, you know, reflection, feedback for what's happening within the system that you all are. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. That you all are managing. And thank you also, Janelle, for saying about what growth you've seen, because I think that's really a powerful piece to understand and see and know that the conversations that you're able to have are different. That means that there have been some shifts in the system, right? There have been some. But what you said was a critical piece, that we cannot expect that the whole system is going to be shifted because the deans are doing something. And that, so like, as we're having these conversations, it's to me, it feels really important that we think about what are some of those other metrics that we might be looking at beyond how many behavioral intervention records a student has. That's what we call it in 97. So that's why it's like my term that I'm using, right? What other pieces are we looking at to determine how effectively restorative is our system, right? So as we're having those conversations, it's like, for me, it's you know, it's important that I'm actually curious to know what are some other metrics of you know, evaluation for whether we're becoming more restorative. And I know I'm like a horse, like I don't want to have anything to do with beating the horse, really. I don't know why we say that saying, but I know that I'm like literally like, you know, like, I don't know why we use that, but I know that I say this all the time, right? But why? What are the metrics that we have that are showing us, you know, do we know how many circles are being performed in the school? Do we know what types of relationships are being developed and how systemic that piece is? And, you know, so there's something to be said for, I appreciated what Linda said about you can't give them everything all at once. You can't just keep using this word restorative and think that people know what it means, because they don't, right? So it's like, what are some of the ways that we're able to see, like Janelle can see it, she's been here 10 years. What are some ways that our committee will have an opportunity to really understand what some of that transformation looks like beyond just looking at Black kids aren't getting referred as much? Because I don't want that to be the metric, right? Because to me, that sounds like we need to fix the Black kids. That's not what we need to do here, right? So I just want us to have I want us to have some other ways to be looking at this information. And I'm curious from you all, right? What can be discussed with our committee that we could be talking about or looking at or thinking about? Because Joylyn said one other piece, and then I'm going to shut up because I really like to give everybody else the floor, but you know, I do my work to move back. Joylyn said one other piece, that it's like critical that what's coming in the building as well, right? And what conversations are being had in our community are definitely impacting what's being had in the building. How are we supporting you all? How are we supporting the system change, the system development? And we're about to talk about an audit, and I really am not clear that this audit is going to provide what we need. So what kind of metrics are you all thinking about for us to look at around this whole, you know, how do we know that we're restorative? How do we know that? How do we know that that's something that's like truly embedded in the culture, that our culture has shifted to that? And now I will stop, or at least I will try very hard to stop right now.
Gina, could I just add, before we can even measure, a struggle that we have is time with teachers to do this training, to provide what they need to feel like they got enough to go do it. Professional development time. And I just need to say it, I am not a part of any of those conversations, but I know that that is a stronghold that interferes with what we want to do. And so we try various ideas of getting it out there in different ways, but we need time.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. Being in a school district, I understand that constraint, right? Like, so I know that there's only a certain amount of PD hours, professional development hours in a year. And once they get used up, they get used up, right? We've been pretty creative in 97 around some ways that we could really get at this restorative piece with a cohort. And you know, so I know, I understand that constraint. I really do. It looked like Michelle was about to say something.
Well, because I think you just said it right there. Why is it a constraint? And why is it not at the top of the list, period? We should not be continuing to have the same conversation. When I graduated the high school in 2000, I love that we're having this conversation. However, we're preaching also just to the choir. We already know all of these things. It is now time for us to really burn down the system that is not working for everyone. And we have to embrace that if we really want to be courageous. And that's sort of what Greg Johnson was saying earlier. Why are they constraints? We have to start asking ourselves that. And that's why it's asking that question of are we making our own beds? Are we taking care of self before anything else?
Yeah, I love that. And then it's the not only access, it's the have to. Like, we have to. You just have to. And we're going to monitor that you're doing that. Like, there's no way around that. You have to teach the skill, then you have to coach the skill, and then you have to monitor the skill to see that it's happening. And I don't know another way outside of that. I can tell when my things are working. When I just started working with the deans just a year ago and I hear Janelle, I'm like, I know it's working because I hear her when she's saying it. Like, I know the cow is working because I can see it happening, and it's on the mouth of people. It's in their ears, and they're talking about it, and students are talking about it. Like, that's how I feel the work getting done. Like, in terms of things when I'm with an initiative or so. But I get it in terms of like the all over, the 100% embedded within the system. It takes more than me just saying it. I'll say that.
I think our greatest asset is having children on this committee, because we fail the children. That's our report card now. For the past 20 years, Michelle, you graduated in 2000. I think for the past 20 years, there's been just committees together, and it's been kind of a bureaucracy. They talk about it every year and nothing really gets done. But now we have our children. If they go on to college and they see that we haven't accomplished anything, it kind of hurts them. It hurts them in their careers. It's a failure. So I think a good asset now is we have these children here So we definitely have to move forward. If we don't move forward, we are failures.
Thank you, Cal. Thank you, everyone. You know, like this is part of the hard conversations to have, right? Like we have to make that priority. And when I say we, like you all know how I feel about the collective. So like the school is not doing this independent of us. Like the students, the community members, like we are all equally needing to take a part in what this looks like. Because quite honestly, many parents will come to the school and be like, why did that kid get suspended because of what happened? Like, I need there to be some punishment. What is happening here, right? Like, so this whole concept in learning for the community is a big piece as well. Is anyone else have a comment? I know that we have a few more minutes left.
I'd really like to hear from, I know, Gina, you didn't want to pressure students to speak up, but especially as we're, again, saying how important they are, their voice is, and it came from a student, as I remember it, really saying, no, this restorative justice is not in reality the way you are, it's not happening. So, and it sounds like from the adult perspective, things are changing and people feel it, see it. And I'm just wondering, students, we only have students for a really short time, and it can take a long time to make this kind of culture shift. So I'd like to hear if someone would. I see Talib maybe came back on. If you might want to speak, if that's what happened, just.
Yeah, I can go ahead and speak on that just a bit. What I've heard is pretty interesting. When I heard that when you kind of go through the system of education, as we've done for the past 4 years, or me personally as a senior now, you get to kind of see the evolution that's happening day to day, and you get to see it over amount of time. When I look back to as a freshman, have things improved personally, and you also have to take that and understand that society is a bit different now. I think that, I don't know if it's because of politics or whatever it may be, but, racism has kind of turned into a thing of where, it's kind of right versus left. It's okay in some places, but it's not okay in others. And it's kind of projected and it's idealized in some places, but in others, it's absolutely not. So I just think that when I look back on my high school experience, I can at least say that I believe that our school is one that wants to get better and is actively trying to get better. I don't know if we're at a point to where we're actually making the change we need to be making. I think, having this committee is a great start. We have people on the committee that want to make a difference and want to change, these kids' lives for the better. And I think we're doing work. I just don't know how time efficient our work is actually, I don't know how much our work is actually doing. And again, it's hard to see because, this meeting builds into another meeting and that goes, and then in a year, maybe we'll have a piece of policy that will, impact kids in 4 years. Like, it's really hard to be able to see the impacts if you're not here for 20 years because, I'm gone in 4 years and I can't really see the change that's going to be happening because of my actions. I just have to hope that they're going to be implemented at a later point. But with the work that I see being done, I'm proud of my time at OPRF and time in committees. And I think that, I can be proud of what we've tried to do here and, the direction that we're going in.
Thank you so much, Talib. No pressure, everyone else, but if you wanted to. We got like 2 minutes left. Quincy or Chase, you want to add anything?
I mean, there's really not much else to add. Like, Talib covered all the bases, I mean, it's just like, I might have said it when you mentioned like how restorative circles like aren't really happening. And you might be referring to what I said. I think Talib also mentioned it. But what I said was that restorative circles, like, I don't really see it as effective, or at least the ones that I've been a part of, where I just didn't see it as effective. You get together, in a circle and you have the conversation. And then I think it was Miss Bishop or, Miss McQueen who said that, the person who, may or may not have done it says, okay, you got me this one time, on to the next one. You won't catch me the next time though, And so that's just, but, like I said, that was just my experience with restorative circles. And that was the only problem that I had with it. I'm seeing them happen more often now, and I'm glad that they're happening more often now. It was just that my concern previously was that I don't think that they're as effective as they could be, and I haven't had one recently. And so I don't know if that is true or if they are starting to become more effective now. But from what I've heard that they have become more effective now than the last time I had one.
Also, if I can just say one more thing, I know we're almost out of time, but the restorative justice circles, my mom's principal in Southside Chicago, so I've actually been able to hear some online, be a part of some other ones. Illinois had its first restorative justice circle court in the South Londo area, which is like really awesome. It's really awesome to be able to see the power that these restorative justice circles can have. And, it made me sad that the restorative justice circle that I was a part of personally, and I don't know if it's gotten better within the last year, it didn't address what it needed to address. The main part of it's supposed to be accountability. You're supposed to be accountable for your actions, and that's how it leads to community growth. Once they are able to share how they felt about that incident and what that person may have done and why they've done it and see, how it hurt people, they're able to learn from it and grow from it. And it is a good alternative to punitive punishment when you have that accountability, but the accountability wasn't there. So I felt we failed. We failed our students. We failed, Quincy, we failed me. We failed everyone in that circumstance. We failed all the victims that, felt some type of way about the incident. So I hope we can do better. I know that at the school, we have a lot of people being trained in restorative justice circle practices, and I hope we can get it right next time. But yeah.
Quincy and Talib, I want to thank you for that. The piece that, the reason why we brought this back up was because of what you just said, right? And what Talib, what you just alluded to that you may have witnessed or experienced was probably restorative conferencing, which is different than doing a restorative circle, right? So if people aren't actually doing the full conferencing process for a harm that was at that level of harm that it sounds like you all experienced, then it doesn't have the same effectiveness. They're two totally different things, right? So when I'm asking like how many circles are being done, how are they being done, who's doing them, when I'm asking for those metrics, I want to know that, right? I want to know, are restorative conferences happening in the way that people are being held accountable so that their behavior is changing, right? Not just peace circles. Peace circles is how you build community. Yes, I want that on the front end. I want that on the front end in every single space that those relationships, like you all are saying, are being the driving piece. But when some harm happens, and it's a harm that, especially around race, you cannot just have a peace circle because that doesn't work. That's not what restorative practices is about anyway. So I appreciate you all reiterating that, because it's not so much, we could have peace circles all day and then not hit the heart of where the harm was, right? So I think that hitting the harm is what's critical. And we're 8:02, we're over time. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. When we, next time we come together, there are some metrics that we're going to need to be talking about that are based around what information we're going to want to provide to the board. I know that that's coming up in one of our next pieces, right, Lincoln?
Yes, that is something that we can actually use what we've been able to talk through today to build on that and talk about the role of metrics and fleshing some of these things out. So, yeah.
So thank you all for your candidness, your time, and your conversations tonight, and for the input. Like, all of this information does get relayed, and we really, really appreciate you. And thank you to the staff for all that you're doing. I know personally how hard the work is, and I know that you're giving it everything that you have. And this is not an easy road. This is a hard, long road. As Janelle knows, she's been doing it a long time. It's a long, hard road, but like the more that we have all these voices in the room, the better it is. So thank you all so much. Now it's 8:03. See, I got to move back. I'm learning. Okay. Have a good night, everyone. Have a good night.
First and
Take care.
second.
Hey, everyone.
Happy
I need a
holidays.
first, move to
Are we
close.
going to adjourn or?
Yes, move to adjourn. Right, thank you. Move
I
it
do
to
want to say
adjourn.
the next time we come together to be next year.
Oh, that's
Oh,
right.
wow,
Sure.
yes.
Yeah,
Happy
so
holiday.
happy holiday.
Happy
everyone.
holidays.
Happy holidays,
Happy
everyone.
holidays, everyone.
New Year.
Can we have a second to adjourn?
Second.
Thank you.
I move.
I got that. I didn't hear the second.
Second, Carolyn.
Thank you.
You have to remind me, see, okay. Thank you.